What happens when Hollywood's most controversial comedian comes face to face with the world's most polarizing royal exile? What unfolds when years of brewing tension between a sharp-tongued talk show host and a duchess desperate to control her narrative finally explodes on live television? You won't believe what happens when Bill Maher decides he's had enough of what he calls the biggest con job in modern celebrity history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two media titans clash in the most explosive television moment of the year. Last night's episode of Real Time with Bill Maher was supposed to be just another Friday night panel discussion, but what viewers witnessed instead was a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral completely out of control. The tension was palpable from the moment Meghan Markle walked onto that stage, her carefully orchestrated smile doing little to mask the underlying hostility that had been building between her and Maher for months. Welcome back to Real Time. I'm Bill Maher, he began with his trademark smirk, and tonight we're joined by someone who has made a career out of playing victim while living in a 16-bathroom mansion. The audience laughed nervously, but Meghan's expression remained frozen in place, her media training clearly working overtime to maintain composure. "That's quite an introduction, Bill," Meghan responded, her voice carrying that practiced sweetness that had become her signature since leaving the royal family. "I'm just here to have an honest conversation about my experiences and the work I'm doing to make a difference in the world." Maher leaned back in his chair, clearly savoring the moment. "Right, honest conversation. That's interesting coming from someone who claimed in a globally televised interview that she had no idea what she was getting into when she married into the British royal family. You're telling me a former actress, someone who worked in Hollywood, someone who ran a lifestyle blog, had absolutely no clue about the most famous family in the world?" The first cracks in Meghan's composure began to show. Her smile flickered for just a moment, and she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I think there's a difference between knowing about something from the outside and actually living it, Bill. The reality of that life, the constraints, the lack of support when I was struggling with my mental health. Those aren't things you can truly understand until you're experiencing them." "Oh, here we go," Maher interrupted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "The mental health card. Look, I'm not diminishing anyone's struggles with mental health. It's real, it's serious. But you had access to the best healthcare in the world, unlimited resources, and you're sitting here telling us that nobody helped you? That's either a damning indictment of the people around you, or it's not the whole truth." The studio audience was completely silent now, sensing that this was already heading into dangerous territory. Meghan's hands clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles whitening as she struggled to maintain her composure. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Bill, but I was very clear about my experiences. I sought help, I asked for help, and I was told that it wouldn't be good for the institution. Are you suggesting that I'm lying about my own mental health struggles?" Maher's expression hardened. "I'm suggesting that there's a pattern here, Meghan. Every single interaction you've had with the press, every interview, every statement, it's always someone else's fault. The British media, the royal family, the institution, the unnamed sources. You've built an entire brand around being wronged, and frankly, it's getting old." "That's not fair," Meghan shot back, her voice rising slightly. "I've tried to take the high road. I've tried to focus on positive work, but when you're constantly being attacked and misrepresented, you have a right to defend yourself and tell your truth." "Your truth," Maher repeated, emphasizing each word. "There's that phrase again. What happened to just the truth? Why does everything have to be your truth versus their truth? Truth is truth, isn't it? Facts are facts." The tension in the studio was becoming unbearable. Meghan's carefully maintained facade was beginning to crack, and Maher seemed to be enjoying every moment of it. He leaned forward, his voice taking on a more aggressive edge. "Let's talk about some of those facts, shall we? You've claimed that you were essentially a prisoner in the royal family, that you couldn't leave, that you had no freedom. But we have photographs of you at charity events, launching your own initiatives, traveling around the world. We have records of you making editorial decisions about your own coverage. How exactly were you a prisoner?" "You're twisting my words," Meghan replied, but her voice was beginning to shake. "I never said I was literally a prisoner. I was talking about the constraints of the role, the way every aspect of your life is controlled and monitored. You can't Understand what it's like to have every single thing you do scrutinized and criticized. Mar let out a bitter laugh. I can't understand being scrutinized. I've been doing this job for 30 years, Meghan. I've been canceled, protested, threatened, and boycotted more times than I can count. The difference is, I don't blame everyone else for my problems. I own my mistakes. I take responsibility for my choices. That's completely different, and you know it. Meghan fired back, her composure finally beginning to slip. You chose this life. You chose to be controversial. You chose to say things that would get you in trouble. I married someone I loved and found myself trapped in a system that was designed to break me down. Trapped. Mar's voice rose to match hers. You had an exit strategy from day one. You kept your American citizenship. You maintained your Hollywood connections. You had your deals lined up before you even left England. If you were really trapped, really suffering, why didn't you just leave quietly? Why did you need to burn down the entire institution on your way out? The studio was dead silent except for the sound of Meghan's rapid breathing. Her hands were trembling now, and her carefully applied makeup was beginning to show signs of stress. But Mar wasn't done. And let's talk about the racism allegations, he continued, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. That's a serious charge to level against an entire family, an entire institution. But when pressed for details, for specifics, for anything that could be verified, you and Harry suddenly got very vague. Conversations about skin color. What does that even mean? How dare you? Meghan whispered, but her voice carried across the silent studio. How dare you minimize the racism I experienced, the racism my children will face? You have no idea what it's like to be the only person of color in those rooms, to hear the things that were said. Then tell us. Mar exploded. Tell us exactly. What was said, by whom, when, where? Give us something concrete, something we can verify, something that isn't just your word against theirs. Because right now, it looks like you're using the most serious accusation you can make to shut down any criticism of your behavior. The confrontation had reached a boiling point, and everyone in the studio could feel it. Meghan was visibly shaking. Now, her carefully constructed public persona crumbling in real time. But as devastating as this exchange had been, it was clear that Mar was just getting started, and the worst was yet to come. What happened next would go down in television history as one of the most brutal takedowns ever broadcast. The silence in the studio was deafening as Mar prepared to deliver what would become the most damaging blow of the entire confrontation. You know what really gets me, Meghan? Mar continued, his voice now dangerously quiet. It's not just the victim narrative, it's not just the convenient memory lapses, it's the sheer audacity of it all. You came into one of the most respected institutions in the world, stayed for what, 18 months? And then you had the nerve to declare the whole thing racist and dysfunctional. Meghan's breathing was becoming more labored, but she managed to find her voice. I never said the whole institution was racist. I said there were concerns expressed about my son's skin color. That's not the same thing. Concerns expressed, Mar repeated mockingly. By whom? When? In what context? You've been dining out on this story for 3 years now, and we still don't have a single verifiable detail. Meanwhile, you've destroyed relationships, damaged reputations, and caused irreparable harm to people who can't defend themselves publicly. They can defend themselves, Meghan shot back, her voice cracking with emotion. They have the entire British press machine behind them. They have centuries of power and privilege protecting them. What do I have? Mar's laugh was harsh and bitter. What do you have? You have $100 million Netflix deal, a Spotify contract, a best-selling book, global platform, and the sympathy of half the world. You've turned your 18 months of royal duty into a multi-million-dollar media empire. And you're sitting here talking about being powerless. The audience was completely captivated now, watching what felt like a public execution in real time. Meghan's hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles had gone white, and her voice, when she spoke, was barely above a whisper. You don't understand what it cost me to speak out. You don't understand what I lost. What you lost. Mar's voice rose again. You lost a job that millions of people would die for. You lost the obligation to serve others instead of serving yourself. You lost the responsibility that comes with incredible privilege. But what did you gain, Meghan? What did you really gain? Before she could answer, Mar pressed on, his attack becoming more surgical with each word. You gained the freedom to monetize your grievances. You gained the ability to play victim while living like a queen. You gained the perfect excuse for every future failure. The institution destroyed me. The media was against me. The family didn't support me. That's not true, Meghan protested, but her voice lacked conviction now. I've tried to use my platform for good, to highlight important causes, to make a difference. Important causes? Maher's eyebrows shot up. Like what? Your 40-minute podcast episodes about how hard it is to be you? Your children's book about benches? Your jam company that never materialized? Or maybe you're talking about your groundbreaking insight that people should be kind to each other. The mockery in his voice was devastating, and everyone in the studio could see that Meghan was beginning to break down completely. Her carefully maintained composure was disintegrating before their eyes. You're being deliberately cruel, she said, her voice now openly shaking. You're twisting everything I've said, everything I've done. This isn't journalism. This isn't holding people accountable. This is character assassination. Character assassination? Maher leaned forward, his eyes blazing. You want to talk about character assassination? Let's talk about what you did to your own father. A man who worked his entire life to give you opportunities, who paid for your education, who walked you down the aisle. And when he became inconvenient to your narrative, you cut him off completely. My father sold stories to the press, Meghan replied, but her voice was weak now. He betrayed my trust. He exploited our relationship for money. He was being harassed by paparazzi because of your relationship with Harry, Maher shot back. He was thrown into a media circus he never asked for. And when he made mistakes, human mistakes, you abandoned him. Your own father has never met his grandchildren because you decided he was bad for your brand. The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Meghan's eyes were filling with tears, but Maher showed no sign of letting up. And let's talk about your sister-in-law, Catherine. Here's a woman who has conducted herself with grace and dignity for over a decade, who has never put a foot wrong, who has dedicated her life to service. But suddenly, after you came along, she's painted as cold, unwelcoming, racist. What did she ever do to deserve that? I never called Catherine racist, Meghan said weakly. I never said she was unwelcoming. You didn't have to say it directly, Maher replied. You just created a narrative where she was the villain in your story. The woman who made you cry, who didn't support you, who was part of the system that was so cruel to you. You destroyed her reputation with implications and innuendo. Meghan was openly crying now, her mascara beginning to run down her cheeks. You're putting words in my mouth. You're making me sound like some sort of monster. I'm not making you sound like anything, Maher said, his voice now cold and clinical. I'm just asking you to take responsibility for your actions, for your choices, for the damage you've caused. But you can't do that, can you? Because that would require admitting that maybe, just maybe, you're not the victim in this story. The tension in the studio had reached an almost unbearable level. Everyone could sense that they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that would be talked about for years to come. But as explosive as this confrontation had been, the final act was still to come, and it would be more devastating than anyone could have imagined. Maher paused for a moment, studying Meghan's tear-streaked face with what looked almost like pity. But when he spoke again, his voice carried a finality that made everyone in the studio lean forward. You know what the real tragedy is here, Meghan? It's not that you left the royal family. It's not even that you aired your grievances publicly. The real tragedy is that you had everything, literally everything, and you threw it all away because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention. That's not true, Meghan sobbed, but her protest sounded hollow even to her own ears. I wanted to serve. I wanted to make a difference. They wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let you. Maher's voice was incredulous. Or they wouldn't let you do it your way, on your terms, with your timeline? Because there's a difference between serving others and serving yourself, and I think we all know which one you chose. The studio cameras captured every detail of Meghan's breakdown. The smeared makeup, the shaking hands, the way she kept looking toward the exit as if calculating her escape route. But Maher wasn't finished with her yet. Let's talk about Harry, he said, and the change in Meghan's expression was immediate and devastating. Here's a man who spent his entire life serving his country, honoring his mother's memory, supporting his family. A man who was beloved by millions, who had found his purpose in life. And then you came along. Don't you dare, Meghan whispered. but there was no strength left in her voice. Don't I dare what? Tell the truth? Point out that the Harry we see now is a shadow of the man he used to be? He's isolated from his family, estranged from his lifelong friends, completely dependent on you for his sense of identity. You didn't just leave the royal family. Meghan, you took their son and brother with you. He made his own choices. Meghan protested weakly. I never forced him to do anything. Didn't you? Maher's voice was razor-sharp now. You presented him with an ultimatum. Choose me or choose them. And when he chose you, you made sure there was no going back. You burned every bridge, severed every relationship, made it impossible for him to return even if he wanted to. The audience was completely silent, transfixed by what they were witnessing. Meghan was crying openly now, her composure completely shattered. You don't understand, she said through her tears. You don't understand what it was like, the pressure, the scrutiny, the way they treated me. I understand perfectly, Maher replied coldly. You couldn't handle being part of something bigger than yourself. You couldn't handle not being the star of the show. So you decided to tear the whole thing down and rebuild it with yourself at the center. That's not fair, Meghan said. But her voice was barely audible now. Fair. Maher's laugh was bitter. You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about the Queen, a woman who devoted her entire life to service, who put duty above personal happiness for 70 years. And in the final years of her life, she had to watch her family torn apart by someone who couldn't be bothered to learn the most basic protocols of the institution she was marrying into. I tried to learn, Meghan protested. I asked for help. I wanted training, but they said I didn't need it. They said you didn't need it because you were supposed to be a mature adult capable of figuring things out. Maher shot back. You were 40 years old, Meghan. You'd been an actress, a blogger, a businesswoman. You want us to believe you couldn't figure out how to curtsy or follow basic royal protocol. The devastation on Meghan's face was complete now. Every defense had been stripped away, every excuse demolished. She looked like a broken doll, her carefully constructed public persona lying in ruins around her. You know what the most pathetic part is? Maher continued, his voice now deadly quiet. You actually could have been great. You had the platform, the resources, the global attention. You could have used your position to make a real difference, to champion causes that mattered, to be a force for good in the world. Instead, you chose to be a professional victim. Stop, Meghan whispered, but Maher was relentless. You chose to turn your pain into profit, your grievances into a global brand. You chose to weaponize your race, your mental health, your motherhood, everything that should have been sacred, to win public sympathy and media deals. I said stop. Meghan suddenly screamed, jumping to her feet. The microphone pack fell from her dress as she stood, the sound echoing through the studio. I don't have to sit here and listen to this anymore. No, you don't, Maher agreed calmly. That's always been your choice, hasn't it? When things get uncomfortable, when people start asking hard questions, you just walk away. You walked away from your family. You walked away from your father. You walked away from your royal duties. And now you're walking away from accountability. I'm not walking away from anything, Meghan said, but she was already moving toward the exit. I'm walking away from a bully who gets his kicks from tearing people down. I'm not tearing you down, Meghan, Maher called after her. I'm just refusing to participate in building you up on a foundation of lies and self-pity. Meghan stopped at the edge of the stage, turning back one final time. Her face was a mask of rage and humiliation, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her hands shaking with fury. You'll regret this, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. You'll regret treating me this way. The only thing I regret, Maher replied, is that it took this long for someone to finally call you out. You've been playing this victim game for years, and people have been too polite, too afraid of being called racist or sexist to tell you the truth. Well, here's the truth. You're not a victim, Meghan. You're a user. You use people. You use situations. You use your own pain to get what you want. And when you're done using them, you throw them away and move on to the next opportunity. That was the final blow. Meghan's face crumpled completely, and without another word, she turned and walked off the stage. The sound of her heels clicking on the floor echoed through the silent studio as she disappeared into the wings, leaving behind only the stunned silence of an audience that had just witnessed television history. Maher sat back in his chair, straightening his tie as if nothing had happened. "Well," he said to the camera, "that was certainly illuminating. We'll be right back after this break." As the cameras cut away and the studio lights dimmed, the audience remained in their seats, still processing what they had just witnessed. It was clear that this confrontation would be analyzed, dissected, and debated for months to come. But one thing was certain: Meghan Markle's carefully crafted public image had been shattered completely, and there was no putting it back together again.